it's very difficult to find out what's really going on in Syria, and my friends in Syria, my contacts with Syrians in Australia really help me. But I don't think there's one person that knows everything. And that's true about commentators on Syria, outside Syria. So, for example, Noam Chomsky recently has come out in support of the Syrian revolution. And Noam Chomsky was a hero of mine when I was an anti-war activist during the Vietnam War days. And I think, where did that come from? How can he, after telling us 2 or 3 years ago about the US game plan was to destroy the Middle East, destroy governments across the Middle East, where does that come from?
Well, I mean, I haven't read Chomsky's latest position on Syria, so I really can't respond in detail to what he's saying. But I mean, everyone makes mistakes. Chomsky's not perfect. He'd be the first person to say that, you know. And you know, every idol has feet of clay, you know. So we very much respect Chomsky for what he's contributed to the Vietnam War. He's an amazing figure, an amazing man, and we all have seen him talk, and the way his mind is like a data bank. He just has such a repository of facts and information. So I don't know why he's supporting this so-called revolution. I mean, is it a revolution? That's a starting question. But he's not the only one. I mean, there are like Juan Cole. He's a very distinguished scholar in America, and he supported, as far as I understand, the decision to intervene, military intervention in Libya and bring down Gaddafi. And I cannot understand why any Middle Eastern scholar could support that. I mean, for me, Western intervention in any Arab country or Muslim country is a red line. You know, whatever you think of the government, you don't allow them through the door, because there's an unbroken record. When they get through the door, they do tremendous damage, and they're only following their own interests. So this is a red line. Don't invite them in. Don't let the wolf into the fold. He did that. And who's the Syrian expert in America, Joshua Landis? He's written some terrible stuff, and he's been proven wrong on many, many occasions. I don't know why. You know, I mean, he's supposed to have a really thorough understanding of Syria. I've seen some of his statements, and you know, it seems to me to be not well founded at all. You know, so I don't understand the workings of the mind here. You know, when it seems to me, and maybe I'm wrong. You know, and you know, people say to me, "Oh, he's a supporter of the Assad regime, or he's an apologist." No, I'm not. I'm very critical of what they've done, and I, along with most Syrians, I think, would like to see a reformed system in Syria. But that's not the question. That's not even the question. The point is how to get there, right? How do we get to that point? You know, and what is the cost going to be? And we're seeing, and we know that these people, these armed groups, are not even interested in these things. They're not interested in democracy in Syria, right? The dominant groups want to set up an Islamic State in Syria. All this talk out from the outside that we need political reform in Syria, you know, but these groups actually doing the fighting have no interest in this, you know. So my own position is, you know, is kind of critical of the government, but having some kind of belief that Bashar al-Assad in particular knows the game, and he knows that Syria has to change. He knows it must be reformed. He knows things can't go on. I don't think there's any doubt about that, you know. And I cannot accept the intervention of the outside world, outside of the British, the French, the Americans, Turkey, and the Gulf states in Syria's affairs. You know, very, very destructive. You know, and of course I can't accept what these armed groups are doing. They're terrible. Some of the crimes they've committed, absolutely shocking, and to a large degree have been overlooked by the West deliberately or blamed on the regime. We had one a few days ago, a large massacre in Khan al-Assal in Aleppo province, more than 100 people killed. Where was this in the Western media? Not there, because it doesn't suit the narrative, right? And if they had included all of the terrible crimes committed by these groups, well, the narrative would have fallen apart. So therefore, they had to be skated over, ignored, blamed on someone else. Yes, so that's my view.
You and I have something in common in that I know the people of Syria quite well. I was a teacher at the British Council.
You know them better than me. Yeah.
But I taught many Syrians. I've met hundreds of Syrians, so my heart is with them now. And of course, you know Turkey very well, the people of Turkey very well. And I remember when I was growing up in the 60s and 70s that it used to be said that, I suppose I got it from Somerset Maugham novels perhaps, that you've gone native. When you know
Okay.
the people of
Right.
another country,
Right.
another culture like
Right,
that,
right.
you've gone native.
Hmm.
You've,
No, I
do you
mean,
think that's still a problem? Is that
no,
still,
no, but that's what people will say if you're saying
even
something.
now,
But
in this
you're
century?
if you're saying something they don't like, that's the first accusation against often.
Even
that is
now?
I haven't heard that for a long time, actually.
But do
that
you think
expression.
it's there? Do you think it's that we have this tribal loyalty to the Anglo-Saxon world, perhaps, the Western world, so-called Western world?
How all of this, this is a mosaic. How these attitudes develop. I mean, the media plays a huge role, and we're only as good as what we know. And if you rely on the mainstream media, well, you're going to have a very particular, very bigoted and view of what's going on in Syria. You've got to work out your own narrative. And I think part of the problem, I don't think is people here, for example, have any loyalty to a British point of view or an American point of view. I think anti-Americanism, like in terms of the policy of the American government, is quite strong in Australia. It's very strong in Turkey. There's not that kind of loyalty, but the media shapes people's views. And so if the media uniformly says Bashar's a tyrant, and the Syrian government is this and the Syrian government is that, well, people fundamentally will go along with it. And if you're a liberal, and you're relying, for example, on The Guardian, that's your beacon of opinion, liberal opinion, and The Guardian's been running the most incredible propaganda campaign for the last 2.5 years. It's absolutely shocking, pernicious. Well, you're going to be terribly misinformed, but you won't realise that because, hey, this is The Guardian. The Guardian tells the truth. But on the Syrian conflict and on Libya before Syria, The Guardian was not telling the truth. The Guardian was spinning out propaganda. Right? It's done this consistently. It's been, I would say, just about the worst. It's reporting of the Syrian conflict. Yes, they're all, none of them are any good. The Washington Post, they're all taking the same line. And The Guardian would come pretty close to being about the worst. So, I don't think people have got fixed positions, but people are shaped. Right? They're shaped by the media. And not everyone has the time to go to the internet and hunt down other sources and develop alternative views. We do, because I'm at university and students are able to do that, but a lot of people are not able to do that. They go to the office, they come home, they're tired, they turn on the television, they might have a brief look at a newspaper, then they crash because they're worn out, and so they will just more or less kind of absorb what they're hearing and repeat it over lunch the next day to someone. I said that person's here is absolutely terrible and this is what's happening. I know it's happening because I read it. I read it in the Herald Sun or whatever, or the Australian. I think this is what happens. Yeah, and we know that the media interests, particularly in this country, but dominated by Rupert Murdoch, total reactionary politically, and has very, very strong views on the Middle East in support of Israel. You wouldn't be able to criticise Israel very much in a Murdoch paper. And, so you read a paper like that and you're going to develop a very particular view of what's going on that might not necessarily be balanced or accurate.
I think it goes back to that point that the West is best. That I feel is almost something that's ingrained in us when we watch so much TV, which is all Western oriented. Whereas,
I discussed this whole issue of the West with friends of mine. We have a similar interest. What is the West? When did this West arise? It wasn't there in the 19th century. It didn't talk much about the West in the 19th century. You might talk about Islam and Christianity. You might talk about Islam and Europe, right? But the West as a concept, basically as a political idea, to me, really goes back to it was used, but, as a really powerful idea in mainstream thought, I think it takes off after 1945. And there was the West, which was America, Britain, France, and their friends, and there was the East. And the East was, of course, the Soviet Union, And what is the West? To me, the West is a very convenient phrase, Western opinion, Western actions. Well, if we look at Iraq, we're not really talking about the West. We're talking about governments, the British government, the American government, what particular governments are doing. But if you attribute all of this to the West, okay, well then they, in a sense, are let off the hook. It's more amorphous. The West is doing this. No, it's not. It's the British government doing this. And the British government has to be held to account. and the American government has to be held to account, not the West. The West, to me, is very useful as an idea, and one has to question, how and why it is used in political discourse, and yeah. So we can talk a lot about that, yeah. But I won't. Yeah.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, that's all right.